everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on elevating technical writing from support to strategy. This is Sheba and I'll be your co-host tonight. I am delighted to introduce our speaker, Sarah Moir, Senior Technical Writer at Sigma. Sarah Moir is a product-focused technical writer with 10 years of experience in data software companies. She specializes in creating user-centric content, restructuring outdated material, and using data to inform her work. And today, Sarah will be sharing insights on how to transform your approach to technical documentation, turning it from a passive afterthought into an active strategic asset that drives user engagement, product adoption, and long-term business success. With that, I'll hand it over to Sarah. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. A little bit more about me. Most of this you heard in the intro, but I wanted to point out that as I've worked as a technical writer, I've reported into engineering and product and support. And I've also written in MediaWiki, Markdown, and restructured text. So a variety of different reporting structures and sort of syntax that I've had to use to write documentation. Today, I want to talk about what it means to be strategic with our documentation, why it's important to be strategic, how to be strategic, and the challenges that we face to strategic work. I promise I won't say strategic as much as I just did for the rest of the talk. First, I want to cover what is the goal of documentation. A lot of us here write it every single day, but why are we trying to do that? What is the goal of our output here? Is it maximum feature coverage, making sure that every feature in the product is documented? Or is it that customers know how to get things done with your product? You might be thinking, well, wait, I think those are the same thing, but I'm not so sure. Because having documentation about how each individual feature works in your product requires the reader to do all the work to understand what's possible, how they work together, and moreover, figure out which features are the right ones to get their work done. But if you approach documentation from the perspective of supporting product development, that's when you're optimizing for coverage and output. But if instead you approach documentation with that more strategic lens, you optimize more for outcomes. But what do I mean by strategic? I can't continue without really defining this, because technical writing is often positioned in that support-oriented role. We're here behind and after engineering to deliver content for specific feature releases, which can easily lend itself to a project-focused mindset, where you only consider the specific tasks involved in delivering the output for a project. But the way that you approach your work helps drive what you produce, your output, the documentation itself. So if you shift your mindset from that project-focused delivery mindset, or put another way, from that support-oriented mindset to a strategic mindset, you can move your role as a technical writer from being just a checkbox in the product development lifecycle to being a full-fledged partner in product development. That all sounds fine and good. What do you get out of doing that? You get better documentation. It's more relevant to your users, optimized for customer outcomes, helps provide decision support, really goes beyond that feature-focused documentation that is just specific to those tasks, specific to using those features. So when you develop that more product-oriented mindset and implement the strategic practices that I'll talk you through today, you can write content that's more relevant for your users, optimized for those customer outcomes, because the documentation that you write about features that supports the projects doesn't necessarily support the customers that are trying to use your product every day, get through onboarding, and really accomplish their own goals and tasks with your product. That sounds great. Sure, we all want to do that. So how do we get there? How do you be strategic? You want to start by focusing on the product, focusing on the people, focusing on the documentation that you work with every day, whether it's the team or the site itself, and focusing on yourself. So let's start with focusing on the product. As a technical writer, you are a subject matter expert. So if you build product expertise, that is the equivalent of product management or engineering, on par or above even what support is able to build. That's really crucial for your success. Explore how the product works, test it frequently. Don't just listen to what engineering tells you about how the product works, but play with it directly. You might need to get access to a staging or a development machine, or learn how to deploy it locally so that you can test these things out and experiment. A key advantage of being a technical writer is that we're not just on one team, we're cross-functional, we work across teams constantly. So you can explore how different features work together because you know about all of them because you're having to document all of them. As part of that, it's important to follow your curiosity. Read design docs to learn more about what we're building and why, even though you won't have to document it for several weeks or months after that design doc comes out. Discover what happens if you try to do XYZ. Doing all of this can help you develop those stronger examples, write use case-based documentation, smarter conceptual content that provides decision support, so that instead of writing 3 separate documents that explain how people can manage access data with row level security, column level security, and different ways of authenticating, you can instead write one document that explains the different options, the trade-offs, why you might implement one methodology or another, and then link to the specifics for implementation details. We're not getting rid of that feature-focused documentation. We're just recontextualizing it. Next, you want to focus on the people, because probably the best way to know your customer is to talk to them. We would love for that to be super easy. I know that Rachel Rigdon gave a talk a few weeks or maybe even months ago at this point about documentation feedback loops. So that's one way that you could do that, is by collecting feedback on your documentation, hear directly from those customers. You can also perform user research to talk directly to your customers, do surveys to discover customer satisfaction. But we don't all have the luxury of talking directly to customers. So you can also listen to them. This can be a more passive approach. You're obviously going to listen when you talk to them, but you can also listen when they're talking to other folks, whether that's listening to the search terms that they type into your website and look for information, reading the forums and information that customers are posting, looking for questions to be answered, or just discussing product functionality. You can also shadow customer support engineers, review transcripts of support calls and support chats, or sales calls to try to find out what customers are saying about the product, the technology that they use, and what they're trying to do. What use cases or tasks are customers trying to accomplish with your product? If you only sit on the engineering side, you might only encounter the feature requests that are coming through, but you might not really know what's driving them, what customers are trying to accomplish, why they're asking for these specific feature requests. But if you know the customer, you can identify these use cases and tasks that's leading them to buy your product. What are they trying to do? What do they want to do in the future? That can help you change your documentation positioning to better resonate with those customers. Be more user-centric in your content itself with the headers that you write to sort of introduce different concepts or tasks, using the same terminology or phrases that customers use to describe what they want to do. Echo that terminology that they use. You can expand on this knowledge and help build this product expertise and a deep understanding of this user by building partnerships across the company. It's easier to do this at a smaller company. I've worked at both. A small company where I am now, just a few hundred folks, to a larger company of up to 6,000 people. And it's also a little bit easier to build partnerships when you're quite extroverted or constantly on Slack, as I am myself. But there's still options. As a technical writer, we're probably pretty partnered up with product management, engineering, and design already. These are the teams that hopefully we work with every single day because they're driving feature development and the things that we're documenting. Building strong partnerships here can help you build trust and become that design and development partner that can help produce higher quality content and product. But there's other teams too. If you build partnerships with product marketing, you can get a better sense for how the company is selling and positioning the product. Marketing is often the first way that a customer or prospect encounters the product feature or area that you're working on, or just generally. And they drive product positioning. So if you partner with marketing, you can discover, what are we telling people about the product capabilities? What are we emphasizing about those capabilities? You can recognize gaps in your current content that you might want to fill, or alter terminology that you use to match or echo the terminology that marketing is using. Sometimes marketing will have their own names for features. You don't have to use exactly the same names, especially sometimes it has drifted from the product name. But you want to make sure that your content at least references those feature names used by marketing so that customers know, aha, I'm in the right spot to learn more about this thing that I read a blog post about 2 weeks ago. That helps provide what I've heard called an integrated content experience so that customers experience the same information across the different websites that your company or product are using. If you build partnerships with developer relations or the DevRel team, you can identify the sorts of technical resources that we're delivering to customers and what those more technical customers and partners are trying to do with the product. Oftentimes, they might be providing more specific or less maintainable content, shall we say, whether it's about integrating with third-party products or writing runnable scripts to accomplish various tasks. You can learn about what DevRel is building and why and how you might want to restructure your content to deliver a more cohesive, cross-linked experience with their content. You don't have to try to redocument what they're doing, put them out of business. They're complementary to a lot of what we do in technical writing frequently. And therefore, we can link across to a lot of that harder to maintain, but still very valuable content that often gets produced by DevRel. And again, similar to marketing, echoing similar content and themes in your documentation as the content and resources that DevRel is producing. If you build partnerships with education, you can identify the mental models that we are building for customers, and therefore what knowledge you want your documentation to be able to echo or build on. What assumptions can you make about the customer? If you have an education or training team, you can basically get access to those assumptions written out in that curriculum because they're providing training to new customers or existing customers that might be new to the product. And if you grok their curriculum, you can understand the terminology, themes, mental models that we're defining in their curriculum that these customers are then building. Your documentation then offers an opportunity to reinforce those themes, terminology, mental models, and build an avenue for feedback and product expertise with that education team yourself by partnering with them to ensure that all of these different content properties stay aligned. So these are teams, product marketing, DevRel, and education that are all building that content that you want to all echo the same terminology and functionality. There's also, of course, technical support. I currently report into technical support, so I'm pretty tightly coupled with this org, which is a privilege for my career and my documentation that I'm able to write. Because if you build these partnerships with tech support, you can identify what customers are struggling with and therefore the documentation gaps that might exist. You might have some misaligned mental models according to what customers are coming to your product with. Knowing what customers are struggling with and what they're writing into support about can help improve not just your troubleshooting content, but also your conceptual content. There might be gaps in the foundations that customers are struggling with, where you need to tweak or help redirect customers' understanding of how the product works. You can realize how customers are actually using the product and the features that you document, not just how product expects those features to be used. Remember that not everything, though, that support encounters needs documentation. There's not like a one-to-one pathway of someone wrote into support about this. Therefore, I need to update or add a note to the documentation to account for it. There's a lot of edge cases that come into support, but you want to pay attention to the themes and the patterns that come up so that you can make sure that they're well addressed in the content. Lastly, these are not the only teams available to you. There's also all the folks in the field. They might be building things for customers, functioning as sort of a sounding board for requests and complaints. They're mostly trying to help customers be successful and stay happy with the product. So they have a tough job. Whether they're customer success, solution architects, field CTOs, professional services, they will know inside and out the use cases that customers are trying to accomplish with your product. They'll know the end-to-end workflows, decision support that these customers are going through, building best practices guidelines, and making recommendations. Not all of the content, again, that these field teams are producing belongs in the documentation, might not be officially supported. But at the very least, you want to make sure that what the field teams are putting together is complemented by the documentation, certainly not contradicted or missing entirely unless that's intentional. You want customers to be able to dig deeper in the documentation to find reliable answers about how the product works, how to implement some of these best practices guidelines, and how they can use the product reliably. After they meet with someone in the field, they can come to you. If the field needs to produce 100% shadow documentation, you have a problem and you need to be more strategic in your documentation to address it. If you're not at a big company, you're really siloed, maybe you're at a tiny company and don't actually have any of these teams, maybe you're not extroverted, and just the thought of talking to all these different people is stressing you out, that's okay. There's other options for being strategic. You can focus on the content itself, whether that's how you're working as a docs team or a team of one, and what you're delivering as part of your work. You can improve the way that you work as a team and within the company. Then you can be more successful and more strategic. When engineering plans, you do too, because you never want to be surprised by the work that engineering is doing. This is driving the meat of your day-to-day content delivery, and you want to stay aligned consistently with their priorities. If you know what's coming from engineering, you might not know when, they might not know when. You can at least plan your own work and prioritize more strategic efforts like filling gaps in the documentation, delivering some resources for customers that bridge those product features across, and deliver some of that decision support. So when engineering plans, if they plan what they're going to work on, you should too. Plan the work that you can accomplish in addition to the engineering projects that they have planned. Because our project focus work doesn't go away, but that should not be your only deliverable. You have to make time to write that outside the box content that helps customers be successful with the product. And to set focus in your documentation deliverables and what you're planning, you want to identify themes. There's always more work than you can fit in. My teams tend to plan on a quarterly basis, and it can be really tough to sort of estimate what can we do this quarter. I always want to do everything. I want to fix everything that I possibly can, but that's not realistic. So I have to be selective and strategic about what we try to do. So if you have themes to associate this high level work to, you can focus on those themes. And instead of getting distracted by whatever the latest request is, someone messages you and is like, I need this right now. If it doesn't fit your themes, you might not actually want to take that on. Because if you let your work be driven by whatever the latest request is, or whoever's the loudest at a given time, you probably won't be able to finish much of your outside the box type content, let alone feature type content. If you lose sight of those overarching goals, whether that's just a short-term task to fill a content gap, add some information that was missed a while ago, or a longer-term goal to provide some holistic best practices guidelines, that's really a challenge. You don't want to lose sight of those themes that you have planned out, because while it can feel good to deliver those immediate requests that people have and react and be like, okay, I got it. I got you. Let's build some rapport here. I'll owe you one. You'll owe me one. But if you're not careful with how you prioritize and strategize that content and that delivery, that type of responsive reactive work will be the only thing that you can finish in addition to engineering type work. If you're a reliable and trustworthy development partner, you're in that partnership, and therefore you have developed and built out a strong ethos of what you're trying to deliver and accomplish and why and how that helps the customer. So it's not about saying, no, I won't do this thing that you asked me to, but it's about considering, does this fit in with what I have planned for this quarter? When might be a better time to work on it? And explain why maybe you won't deliver that request right now because you're working on some higher priority tasks according to what you've defined would help the customer the most. Because if you fall over yourself to deliver every single thing that someone asks for, your work will suffer, your content will suffer, and nobody wins. You won't be able to get much done. It helps to keep these themes top of mind and share them out with folks if you codify them in a roadmap. This sounds like a lot of work, I know. You can get something as simple as just now, next, later that describes what you're working on now, what you're planning to do next, and what you're saving for later. What are you intentionally not doing yet? You can formally go all in, add your work to the engineering roadmap if they've got one, and go through their planning process, or you can make your own. Just do what works for you. For any project on your roadmap, you should know why something is planned for now, why something is next, and why something is planned for later. And the themes that you identify should echo these. And to help stay focused and make all of this easier, make all of this planning easier, it's important to scope and triage your work. I'm a big fan of Jira for tracking content. I know I'm in the minority there. I know a lot of folks like tools like Linear and others. I've never used anything except Jira at work. But no matter what tool you're using to track your work and track requests and tasks that you need to deliver, it's important to have a central place to keep track of all of this information. You want to make sure that any task or request that you get is scoped with what is the actual request? What are they asking you to do? The task required to execute that, and the outcomes that you would expect to follow on after you deliver that task. That helps make it easier to identify the themes that you can work on month by month, quarter to quarter, and deliver those requests efficiently and effectively. I love process, so this is my favorite thing to do, but it's not the only thing that you can focus on. When you consider the documentation, you can also talk about the site itself and make some decisions there. Because when you're being strategic, you want to make sure that your content is well designed. When I mean design, I don't really quite mean visual design. I don't mean make your site pretty, though that's nice to do too. You want to make sure that you are writing findable content that is delivered where people look for it. Whether that's web first content, AI first content, whatever you want to know about how customers are getting to your content, you need to know if that's through search, AI interfaces, direct links that people are sharing or sending to them in emails or education courses. It's really important to know that most likely no one is going to read your content like a book. Don't write your content like people are excited to read it. Very few people are going to be thrilled to need to check out the technical documentation for a product that they are using. Instead, you want to make sure that you meet your users where they are and where they're going to be soon. Make it easy to find your content. And also make it easy to use your content. You want to follow web design best practices when you're formatting your content, things like semantic markup, using callouts and admonitions sparingly, and using color and emphasis with intention. Having a style guide and following it helps make interacting with your content simple and easy for people to get that information and get back to work. You also want to acknowledge that not everybody reads. I love reading, but I also get sucked into hour-long YouTube rat holes about learning information. So if you provide multimodal content, whether that's videos that show the before and after of a process or a task, helping people visualize some steps, providing diagrams that explain some architecture or complex workflows, runnable code or API examples for people to experiment right in the documentation. That helps people get up and running faster. You could provide things like interactive sandboxes or validator scripts, embedded content from your product to really help people experience how something works before they log in. Maybe even tutorials with quiz questions. There's really a lot of options available, and I would challenge you to think beyond the static web page or the PDF gone digital to consider different ways to provide content to your customers that helps them be successful with their tasks and objectives. And lastly, focus on yourself. We've covered how to be strategic by building product and customer expertise, by improving your documentation processes and content design. But there's still more you can do. If you're here today, you're doing great with this task, educating yourself. Thank you for joining. I appreciate that you're here. Never stop learning. I think it's important to look outside of your company, beyond your customers, beyond your documentation, and learning what else is out there. What do I mean by that? Learn about the market. Know what's happening in the industry that your product is sold in. What are the trends? Who are your competitors? What are they selling? What are they building? How do they position your product, their products, and their documentation? What's on their documentation sites? If you do some competitive analysis and learn more, follow those competition discussions internally, you might get some new ideas about what you can provide to your customers. You also want to stay apprised to the documentation innovations happening around you. What are the benefits and trade-offs of different ways of providing your content, whether that's Docs as code or using a different content management system than the one that you're currently on? What are the different ways that people are drafting or delivering content to customers? Go to conferences, read blog posts, follow different people and organizations on LinkedIn, maybe start a local community of practice or a meetup, or go to a meetup. Listen to some podcasts. There's a remarkable number of technical writing podcasts out there these days. You want to find out what's going on out there in the world of content delivery. And you also want to track information trends more broadly, beyond technical documentation. How is the internet and information seeking behavior changing? In the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen a huge rise of short form video and AI chatbots, but a lot of the tech writing industry is still delivering PDFs or book-like content that happens to be on the web. You want to pay attention to the trends that are happening in information consumption and identify what's relevant for the people that might be interacting with your content. You can't meet your users where they are and give them findable content unless you know where they are or where they might be soon. So I know we've covered a lot today. So I wanted to quickly recap what I've talked about. I think it's important to know the product and build that product expertise. Know the customer either by talking to them or reading what they say and listening to them. Building partnerships with other teams that interface directly with customers. Define a better process and way of working within your team to build capacity for delivering more strategic content. Designing your docs to be the best that they can be, and educating yourself to know what's going on and what's happening next. But it's not as straightforward as just following these steps. You might be like, sure, cool, that sounds great, but that's not that easy. You might be considering like, it's really hard. I can barely get all of my writing done, let alone whatever it is that you're talking about today. It might just seem intimidating to deliver feature-focused content is easy. It's really straightforward to say, okay, this project is happening. I will deliver content about project, done, go. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but shifting your mindset and approach to something new can be really tough. We don't all have a lot of bandwidth to spare for learning and shifting and adapting, especially these days. It takes a lot of energy, especially on a daily basis, to shift these practices and habits because we're all lazy in our hearts, let's be honest. It's always easier to write that how to use feature documentation than it is to consider, okay, this new release is happening. How is that going to reformulate the structure of the content that I have? Do I have the time? Do I want to put in the effort? Do I have the autonomy to make these changes that I think would be best for the customer experience? Because you might be listening to this talk being like, this sounds like a beautiful world that I wish I could be a part of, but I don't have the power or autonomy to do this at my role or at my company. I'm a cog in a very large machine, or maybe no one likes the documentation team, and I find it really tough just to get in the room and find out what's happening, let alone get resources to do much more. We're lucky to find out about a feature release, let alone be a trusted partner in development. And maybe you're just not sure where to start, which hopefully this talk has helped you with. How do you overcome these challenges? These are non-trivial. And really, it's just about starting. I know that sounds somewhat flippant, but I really mean it. Just start doing something. Start with what you can control. If you're an individual contributor, you might not be able to change a lot, that's true, but you can change some things. I would challenge you to do one thing on this list that I've brought to you today, whether that's whatever is most interesting to you or whatever seems most critical, where the pain in your organization is the deepest. Or maybe that's where it seems the easiest to start. What's the lowest hanging fruit that you can pick up? Because different things work at different organizations. You're going to have to make different decisions according to the maturity of your team, your company, your product about what's most important and relevant to do today. But the more you flex this strategic muscle, the easier it gets to do it. So I hope this helps. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Sarah. And that's a wrap for today's session. A huge thank you to Sarah for walking us through the topic today. I hope the insights shared tonight gave everyone a clearer understanding of how to design documentation that caters to users with varying levels of technical expertise. And of course, if you have more questions or want to learn more about Document 360, then feel free to reach out to us. We'll be back soon with another session soon. Until then, see you next time. Thank you, everyone.